So we've been in this series on called Starting Over for the last few weeks. This is the third week in this series. I love the theme because here's the reality. Isn't it true? At some point in your life, you have to start over. The reality is every year you will start something over. January's coming up quickly, right? We're a lot closer to January. It's going to be a new year, and many of you are going to think about New Year's resolutions. Like, here's the goals I want for this year, and you're going to start over on a goal that you failed to accomplish last year, and the year before, and the year before, and the year before. You're going to start over again, and this is going to be the year, right? Some of you are like, I don't even try anymore. But you need to try. You need to start over again, right? You need to start over to accomplish that goal. For some of you, the starting over is back to school because the education you chose when you were 18, when you didn't have a brain in your head, it's not the field you want to be in, and you need to start over. You need to go back to school to get the degree you want, to be in the field you want to be in. You need to start over. Some of you starting over is going to be starting over with God. Because a long time ago, you got hurt and you walked away from your faith, and you need to start over with God. And some of you starting over is going to be starting over in a romantic relationship. So many things we start over, and some of the best stories in America today are start-over stories. Those are some of my favorite stories, and I love these stories. So I read the story this last week about a woman named Anna Marie Robertson. When she was a little girl, she fell in love with art, but she lived in a time, a long time ago in our country, where there weren't a lot of educational opportunities for her. She went to a little one-room schoolhouse for a while and then had to go to work, and then she got married, and then she had 10 kids, and so she did not pursue her love of art until she was 67. Her husband died, and she was so full of depression, she didn't know what to do. So she picked up a paintbrush, never had a class, never ever studied about art, just started painting. She started at the age of 67. Some of you, your future career, it's still ahead of you, okay? She started painting. She loved it. One day, a man traveled into her town, and this store had all of her art displayed in there. He walked in, took one look at all the artwork, fell in love with it, bought every painting in the store. She was 78 when that happened. 78. And at the age of 78, an artist we know as Grandma Moses was discovered. You ever heard the name? This painting of hers recently sold for $1.2 million. $1.2 million, and she started over at 67 and was discovered at 78. And then just for fun, at the age of 92, she wrote a book. Some of you have no idea what's coming for you yet. You think that you're kind of wrapping it up at the end of the time, slowing down, and God's just chuckling, and heaven's like, you haven't seen what I got planned for you yet. You're going to have a start-over moment. You got a start-over moment coming for you, and starting over moments can be amazing, right? I mean, you think that she thought at the age of 67 her whole life was about to change when she picked up a paintbrush and just started painting things? She had no idea what was about to happen to her and all the cool things that were coming her way as she started over at that age. But that's how this works. But the reality isn't what you know. When we've talked about this series, it's just because you have good intentions and you start over doesn't mean you'll get good results, right? Every day in America, there are people who start over. It's like, this is the one. Oh, man, this time, this romantic relationship, this is going to work out. And it's the exact same result. Or this job, this is going to work out, and it's the exact same result. Or this time, I'm going to stick to my budget, and it's the exact same result, right? It never changes. Just having good intentions doesn't change anything. In order for you to start over and next time be better than the last time, there are 3 things that have to happen. We've covered 2. So if you missed it 2 weeks ago, we said the first thing that has to happen is you got to own what you own from your failures. If you are sitting here pointing the finger of blame, then you're a victim and you got nothing to own and you will never change anything. You have to deal with what part of your failures and pain from the past are you responsible for. If you don't answer that question and actually seriously answer that question, then you're doomed to repeat the same things. Why start over? Because you're just going to fall right back into the same trap. And then last week we said the second thing you got to do after you own what you need to own, you own it, you rethink it. Instead of just asking the question, oh man, what was I thinking? Actually answer the question, what were you thinking? And we walked through a whole process you can use to rethink the painful decisions from your past. And you have to do that. Otherwise, again, you're just likely to repeat them because those are patterns in your life. You got to rethink them. So we talked about that, and you can, again, watch all these on YouTube. And now the third step that has to happen is you have to forgive it. So you own it, you rethink it, and then you forgive it. Now this is interesting because, this was one of the first things, I've been preaching since June 1st, 1991. That's a long time. One of the things that surprised me about preaching is how many times I've taught on the subject of forgiveness, and it's the number one most requested message after I'm done. Because in my mind, I'm like, I already covered this. I've covered this a lot. And yet every time I cover it, it's the one that people want the most of, and they want to talk about it again, and they want to call me and discuss it with me, or they want to watch that message over and over again, or they share that message with somebody they know that needs it. And it's not hard to, when you think about it, did any of this happen to you in the last year since I've spoken about it? Did you get hurt? In the last year, was there any moment where you felt excluded or forgotten or rejected? Is there any moment in the last year where you felt taken for granted or where you received unfair criticism? Hey, anyone get gossiped about in the last year? Anyone feel overlooked at any point in the last year? Yeah. How many things could I put on a slide like this? Every single year we get hurt over and over and over and over and over again. And so forgiveness is always a topic that we're going to need to cover because it happens to you. You need to forgive some things. Because the reality is what happens is you get really, really hurt in life. The people around you hurt you. You're someone at work or someone in school. Oh my goodness, poor kids in school today. Constant pain. And you get hurt, and all of a sudden that trauma just kind of stays with you. And the image that happens is something like this. It's like that pain gets attached to you, and you're trying to move into the future, dragging this ball and chain. Well, go ahead and run into your future. You going to be able to move effectively in your future like this? No shot. You can't move into the future chained to your past. If you want to start over and have your next time be better than the last time, then one of the things you have to do is you have to think about this subject deeply, and you're going to have to learn how to do this today, how to release your past. And that comes through forgiveness. In your program are these notes. Can I ask you to please take your program, open up your program, grab your notes out, grab a pen. There are pens in the back. If you didn't pick one up today, you're welcome to walk back and get one. Welcome to those of you watching on YouTube. Right in the comments section below are these notes. If you want to open up the link and click into that and open it up, because this is such an important subject. I don't care how many times you've heard me talk on this. Some of you heard me talk on it a lot. There are going to be some new things you're going to learn today. And there are going to be some things that God, I believe, is going to speak directly to you about, and this is really important. So grab a pen. Let's go ahead and get started today. How do you learn to forgive and release your past so you can move into your future? Number one, it always begins with this. You have to understand the high cost of bitterness. This is where we always start. You have to understand what you're choosing if you choose not to forgive. You have to understand the high cost of bitterness. Have you ever seen what a powerful acid can do? Maybe you had a chemistry class in high school or college. You've seen maybe work around chemicals. This is what it does to concrete. That's concrete. It just eats right through it. This is what it does to steel. You could take a hammer and pound away at steel and not really make much of an impact, but you put the right acid or corrosive on it, it just eats right through it. And the reason I'm telling you that is because recently there was a man who wrote a book on forgiveness. He's an associate professor of psychiatry at a college. And he said this: bitterness is a nasty solvent that erodes every good thing. It's like one of those acids. This is actually a pop can placed in an acid. That was a pop can. And you can see the acid is just eating it away. And that's the imagery that he's playing on. Is that bitterness is just like an acid that you're just swallowing. And it is damaging you. Now, the interesting thing about this is you can see the effects of this damage in our society every single day. There's so much bitterness in our society. There's so many bitter people. Matter of fact, one of the most stunning examples, and I can't remember if I ever shared this with you, but earlier this year I saw this and I grabbed it. This woman passed away recently. You can recognize it as an obituary, Kathleen. But halfway down it says this: in 1962, Kathleen became pregnant by her husband's brother and then moved to California. She abandoned her children, Gina and Jay, who were then raised by her parents. And look at the last paragraph. She passed away on May 31st, 2018 in Springfield and will now face judgment. She will not be missed by Gina and Jay, and they understand that this world is a better place without her. Do you know how much pain Gina and Jay are in that they would write those words and put them in an obituary? Many of you have thought it. You've wanted to say it at somebody's funeral when everybody's standing up saying how amazing a person they were, and you're like, ugh. But they actually put it out there for the world to see. That's bitterness. How much pain are they in? In Hebrews it says this, watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you. It uses the right word. As a matter of fact, if you're following along in your notes, would you circle the word poisonous? That's what it is. Bitterness is poison. You are literally you're figuratively, the Bible would say, swallowing poison into your body. Now, the interesting thing about this verse, I remember when I memorized this verse years ago, the last two words were confusing because we tend to think of bitterness as a solo issue, right? If I were to ask you, are you bitter today? Some of you are. You've been deeply hurt in your life and you feel bitter towards someone, you feel angry towards someone. And we tend to think of it as an individual thing. The Bible doesn't present it as an individual thing. The Bible says if you become bitter, it doesn't just affect you. It's not just poison you swallow. It's poison that affects the people around you. Look at those last two words. Look at them, corrupting many. It's like you're drinking the poison and it's splashing on the people around you. That's the imagery that you need to have in your mind. You think that bitterness is just a solo issue, that it's just affecting you? Oh, no, it isn't. Your bitterness isn't just toxic to you, it is toxic to everyone around you. Corrupting many, the Bible says. It corrupts many. That same author that I quoted earlier said that it's like a corrosive. He went on to say this. He's actually trying to get a new mental illness categorized called PTED, where it's post-traumatic embitterment disorder. It's for people who cannot forgive. Because it's so serious an issue in our society. People are being so damaged by this. And then he goes on in the book to talk about different ways in which it affects us. We know this. You know that bitterness, if you become bitter towards someone, it interferes with your body's hormonal, your growth systems, and your immune systems. So you make yourself sicker by being bitter. We know this. This isn't even debated. Go to the Mayo Clinic website and type in the word bitterness. You will see all of these things just validated and so much more. Science is showing us that when bitterness enters your body, it begins to poison you. Do you know that it's directly linked to higher blood pressure, a higher heart rate? It's also, you are more likely to die from heart disease and other illness. I find it fascinating that one of the things that bitterness does is poison your heart. It kills you. Someone once said, bitterness is the poison that we swallow hoping the other person dies. That's exactly what bitterness is. It's poison you take into your body, hoping they die. Now, do they die? They don't even care. They don't even care. It doesn't affect them at all. You're not splashing on them because most of the time they're not even in your life. But this is what we know. This is what bitterness does. It is toxic to us in every way. It's interesting then when you understand that what the Bible's been talking about for thousands of years, it's so true scientifically. David wrote and said, I realized that my heart was bitter and I was all torn up inside. You ever felt all torn up inside? Because you were so bitter. You were so angry at what was done to you or someone you love that you felt torn up inside. You ever felt that? That's the right descriptive word. So my question is, and I really need you to think seriously about this, is who do you feel bitter towards today? Who's hurt you? Who's hurt you? Who is it that you're sitting here today and you're like, I'm not forgiving that person? The interesting thing about this subject too, and I've noticed this in my own life, is that I can sit here today and think I'm doing really good. By the way, I don't think I'm doing good, but I can. I can lie to myself and think, I don't really have an issue with this. I'm okay. I'm really kind of a forgiving person. I've let all of that go, until you start looking for symptoms of bitterness. You ever have any sudden outbursts of anger? Desperate to make someone understand how you feel. You know how many times I've seen that? It's like, I just have to try again. I just got to try and make them understand. Why? Because then if they only understand, then they'll be sorry, and then they'll be... And you know what happens with those people trying desperately to get the other person to understand? You know what happens when they try again? Does it work out well? Most of the times, absolutely not. They just don't understand. And many times it feels like they're not even trying to understand. But you want to make them understand because now it'll be different. You struggle with anxiety or depression or high blood pressure, these are all directly linked to bitterness. You can list their offenses. Some of you, if I said, I want you to think about the person who hurt you and I want you to tell me, you rehearse the story, you tell the story, you know the story of what they've done. Everyone around you knows the story of what they've done because you're in so much pain. You replay negative scenes over and over, you gossip about them. Or you want to, maybe your Christianity is strong enough. The interesting thing is, Jesus had so much to say about this subject because he knows how poisonous this is. You need to understand this about God. God loves you and wants your future to be better. He wants your future to be better than your past, and he will never, ever, 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 ever let you continue in something that's destructive for you. And so you look at what Jesus talked about, and he talked about the subject of forgiveness. One time he told the story. He said, I think Peter was the one who came to him and said, Jesus, how many times do I have to forgive someone? And he listed like 7 times because it was like more than what the rabbis of their day were asking for. And Jesus said, oh no, 70 times 7. In other words, just keep forgiving them. And then he told a story. He said there was a king one day who decided to set up all of his accounts. Anyone who owed him money, he brought him in. And so one day he's settling up his accounts and this servant was brought in. Now the servant had accumulated a debt that was the equivalent of 375 tons of silver. So you go and you're getting your car to leave after today, that car weighs approximately 2 tons. So if you lined up 180 cars, you'd need to fill every single space in that top to bottom with silver, and that's what this guy owed. It was millions and millions and millions of dollars. And in those days, it's not like today where you just file for bankruptcy. No, if you owed the debt, you paid the debt. And if you couldn't pay the debt, they put you in jail. And you became a slave for the rest of your life till you paid the debt out, or you died in jail. So the king looked at the guy and he said, pay me what you owe me. The guy could not pay this debt. It was impossible. And so the king said, all right, you go to jail, your family goes to jail, we sell everything off, and you will spend the rest of your life, all of you, as my slaves till this debt is repaid. And the guy falls on his knees in the story, and he pleads with him. He says, please be patient with me, and I will pay back everything I go. Oh, here's the question. Could he ever pay back everything he owed? Never. Never, never, never. It was never going to happen. If he lived 1,000 lifetimes, he wasn't going to pay that debt back. And the interesting thing in the story is what the king's response is. He looks at his servant and he feels compassion for him. And so in his compassion, he goes, I pardon the debt. You owe me nothing. Can you imagine what he felt when he left the throne room that day? Just think about it in your context. You probably don't owe anybody millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. But let's say that tomorrow, the bank and everybody you owed money to, you owe money on a house, you owe money on a car, owe money on a credit card, let's say all of them called you tomorrow and said, for some reason, we're just going to let it all go. We pardon the debt, you owe nothing. You're going to feel pretty good, right? You don't owe a mortgage or a car payment or anything? Man, this is amazing. And out he goes. And then the story takes this crazy turn. He goes out and he finds a buddy who owes him 1 day's wage, 1 day. And he grabs him by the throat and he says, pay me what you owe me. And the guy uses the exact same phrase. He falls on his knees and he says, be patient with me and I will repay you. The same words that guy had just said to the king, he says to him. And if you know the story, you know he says, nope. You don't have it, you're going to jail right now. And he threw the servant into jail, his friend into jail. Well, the story got back to the king, and the king was, livid. He said to his soldiers, you guys go find that guy, you drag him back in here. He drags him back in, and then this is what he says to him. Jesus said, the king called in the man he had forgiven and said, you evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had mercy on you? Should he have? Yeah, he should have had mercy, right? Then he says this, then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. Was he ever going to pay that entire debt? Never. He went to prison for the rest of his life after imprisoning someone else. And then Jesus kind of sums up this whole story with some of the scariest words in the entire Bible. That's what my Heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. The reality is, many of us are demanding payment from people who've hurt us in the past. We have not forgiven them. We will not forgive them because they owe us and they will pay us. And so what we've done, some of you have imprisoned them. Some of you run Alcatraz in your mind today. You run Alcatraz in your mind. You have so many people in prison. Those kids and what they did to you in school, you will never forgive them. You will never forgive what they did. That boyfriend or girlfriend from your past, you will never forgive them for what they did to you. That ex from your life, you will never forgive them. That boss, your coworkers, what they did, you will never forgive them. They are all imprisoned in your mind. Just like the story. You pay or you go to jail. And so you've imprisoned them in your mind. And the result of that is tremendous, nonstop pain for you, physical, emotional pain. You have swallowed the bitterness, you're dying. It's literally poisoning your body. Because actually all you've done is imprisoned ghosts from your past. They're not actually in prison. They're out there living life. They haven't thought about you in years. You're torturing yourself because of the pain that you will not forgive and you will not let go of. So do you understand this? Who is it that you will not forgive? And here's the more important question. Why won't you forgive them? And you're like, Brian, you don't know what they did to me. You don't know how long they did it to me. You're right, I don't. And I say, then, yeah, but you've just heard this. How long are you going to suffer for what they've done to you? People fight forgiveness because of some common misconceptions, which is why we have to talk about number 2. You have to understand what forgiveness is. You have to understand what forgiveness is. There's a woman who went to a counselor to talk about all the pain from her past. And the counselor was a Christian counselor, and he talked to her about forgiveness, and she said this, I know I am supposed to forgive. You know, Jesus told us to do this, but I just can't open myself up to that kind of hurt anymore. I know I should forgive him and trust him, but if I let him back in, the same thing's going to happen, and I can't go through that pain again. Have you ever felt that way? And all of that is a misconception about what forgiveness is. She's resisting something that isn't forgiveness. That's not forgiveness. So in order to understand this, flip your notes over in the back. Take a look at this. I've been collecting this list for years, what forgiveness is not. It's really important. This is just kind of homework for you for later. There are all kinds of things on here that I want you to read through later, but not now. I just want you to be aware this list is on your back because some of you, on the back of your notes, because some of you are resisting forgiveness because you don't even know what it is. So I want to highlight a couple of these, though. Take a look up here. For some of you need to know this today. Forgiveness doesn't mean you need to tell that person that they're forgiven. Some of you are like, I don't want to forgive them because then I have to go to them and say, I've forgiven you. Are you kidding me? Some of you should never again, for the rest of your life, talk to the person that you're forgiving. Because you know what's going to happen if you say to them, I just want you to know I've forgiven you, they're going to hurt you again, and now you'll have another thing to forgive. It doesn't mean you have to say anything to them. Don't believe that. Forgiveness doesn't mean you won't have any more feelings about the situation. Some of you are confused. It's like, hey, I've forgiven them, but I still feel sad, and I still feel angry, and these moments still trigger. It's like, I must not have forgiven them. Oh, no, the healing in your heart, the grief takes a long time. You can forgive someone and still feel sad about what you've lost. Grieving just takes a long time. But forgiveness gives you the opportunity to actually enter fully into the grieving process. You can forgive, oh, this is so important. Forgiveness doesn't mean you should forget about the incident. I've said this many times. You should forgive and remember. You have to forgive and remember. Some of you have no idea what that means, and I'll show you in just a minute. Doesn't mean forgetting. Forgetting is impossible. Go ahead and try and make yourself not think about a pink elephant right now. Whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant. Don't think about an elephant, big curly tail on the back, big trunk going up like, don't think about a pink elephant. Whatever you do, don't have an elephant in your mind. Don't think. Right, so I'm going to stop thinking about this? Yeah, what are you going to think about? It doesn't mean forgetting. You can't forget. And by the way, you shouldn't forget. It's not forgiveness. And then forgiveness is not based on their actions. Well, I won't forgive. I hear this all the time. You don't have to forgive until the day they come to you and apologize, and you have confused different things in the Bible. So let me show you this. This is not on your notes. Some of you have to write these words down somewhere on your notes, because this is what's messing you up and keeping you from experiencing what God wants you to experience. This is from an author named Dr. Henry Cloud, one of my favorite authors, quote him all the time, and this is such an important distinction that you have to get or you will never forgive people. Forgiveness is all about the past. Someone did this to you in the past. The past may be as soon as yesterday, or maybe this morning on the way to church. Don't you love those? So you got to forgive, but it's in your past. But that's not the same as being reconciled to somebody. That's present. Am I going to reconcile with them? And trust is future. Should you ever trust them again? They are all different questions. We're only dealing with the first one today. So let me show you this. Reconciliation has to do with the present. And the question is this: should I restore the relationship? Should I be friends with them ever again? Now, sometimes the answer to that is yes. Sometimes the answer to that is no. But it depends on their choices. Here's what you got to ask yourself. Do they own what they did? Are they sorry for what they did? Genuinely sorry? Have they sincerely apologized? If you cannot say yep, yep, yep to those questions, it's not safe. It is not safe to reconcile with them. Matter of fact, you won't be able to reconcile with them. Ever try and sit down with somebody who hurt you in the past and try and talk to it, and they just ignore it, and they don't acknowledge it, and they blame you, and they turn around on you? You are not in a real relationship with that person from that day forward. You have a fake relationship from that day forward. You're not reconciled. And you need to understand that. Some of you, you'll just have fake relationships in your life for the rest of your life. Right? Isn't that true? There are some people you should only talk to about the weather. And that's fine. You're not reconciled to them because they own nothing, they acknowledge nothing, they take no responsibility for the pain they've caused in your life. Reconciliation is a different process in the Bible. So these are the questions you ask. Should I be restored to them? Many of you, the answer is no. If you let them back in at the same level you had them before, you're going to get hurt again because they own nothing. Then there's trust. And the question is this about my future? Should I trust this person again? Well, are there signs that their behavior is changing? Have they gone to counseling now? Have they owned it? Like we said, if they apologize to you, have they apologized to the other people they hurt? Are they changing their behavior? Are they doing things differently? Here's what you need to understand. The Bible gives you permission not to be friends with everybody. Did you know that? A righteous man is cautious in friendship. It's okay. One of the most important things I can ever teach you is don't freely trust people. Trust is always earned. Trust is always earned. Let's say that you've been hurt by somebody and you go to them and you apologize, and let's say that they sincerely want to, let's say that it seems like in the moment they go, yep, you're right, I did that, it was wrong. Should you now trust them? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You are free to say to them, I'm glad you apologized. Thank you for apologizing to me. It really means a lot. I don't trust you right now, but I hope that in the future I can. Now, their reaction to that is really important. They should say to you, I get that. I know it's going to take a little while to re-earn your trust, and I'm sorry for what I've done. That's an intelligent, reasonable human being you're dealing with. You've got real basis for hope. But you know what you hear so many times? It's like, how can you say that? You say you're a Christian. You say you're just forgiving me. And it's like, they just want you to trust them. That's not how trust works. And if you do that, you're setting yourself up for more pain in the future with these people. Trust is always earned. And reasonable people, if you say that to me, if you're like, Brian, I'm not sure I can trust you, but I'll give you a shot. I'll take that shot. You take your time. You get to know me. You see if what you've been told is true or not. I don't have any problem with that. But crooks and charlatans and people without character, they don't like it when you say that to them. You should always have all your red flags going off when you say, it's going to take a while for me to trust you again, and the person reacts with, wah. Don't trust them. Because trust is always earned. Do you understand the distinction between these three? Some of you, this is why you won't forgive someone, is because you think you need to let them back in your life. You gotta be at their house every weekend again, and you gotta be, all the old relationship stuff is restored. Are you kidding me? Forgiveness is based on one, you. Reconciliation is based on two. Two people have to reconcile, but you can forgive anyone. And you forgive because Jesus commands it, and it's poisonous to you, and not just you, like the verse said, it's poisoning you and all the people around you. If you say you love them, you don't want to do it for your own sake, do it for their sake. Forgive for them, but you don't have to reconcile. You don't ever need to talk to them again, and you never need to trust them again for the rest of your life. Do you understand the distinction here? So that's what forgiveness isn't. It's not reconciling. It's not trusting them ever again. So what is it? In one word, it's the word pardon. It's what the king said to that servant in the story. He said to him, you owe me 375 tons of silver. I pardon the debt. I'm going to just take that 375 and scribbling it out. You don't owe me that anymore. I pardon the debt. Now, as a Christian, we get this amazing advantage here. Because it's not like we're saying, well, it didn't matter. No. What you're actually doing is you're transferring that debt to God. You're saying, God, they don't owe this debt to me anymore. This 375 tons, I give it to you. They owe it to you. I'm transferring this debt this person owes to you. That's why the Bible is so clear. In the New Testament, it says, don't ever get even. Don't take revenge. It says this. Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God. The scripture says, this is what God is saying. God says, I will take revenge. I will pay them back. It's not your job. It's the imagery of the scales of justice. When somebody in your past has hurt you, the scales are now tipped out of balance. And getting even is evening the scales, right? I'm going to get even with them. And God says, that's not your role. Don't get even with them. You can't do it right. You'll do too much, too little, and it won't work. It's not your role in life. Your role is to forgive them, transfer that debt to God and say, God, this is not mine, this is yours. God, they don't owe this debt to me anymore. I'm transferring this debt to you. I forgive them. I pardon this debt. They owe me nothing. And you transfer that to him. And I love what this one author said. Like I said earlier, so many of us are like the servant in that story. We've got all these people in jail. You owe me this debt, and I'm not letting you free till you pay back. We got all these people in jail. One author said, forgiveness is setting the prisoner free, only to find out the prisoner was me. You think you got them in jail? You know who's really in those jail cells you've got in your head? You. You think they're in jail? Are you kidding me? They don't even think about you. You're the one in jail. And when you finally forgive them, you walk into freedom and you realize the truth of that sentence. You think they're in jail and you're the one in jail. It's always interesting whenever I teach on a subject like this, what God does. It's like I've said before, I'm going to preach on what it's like to win the $1 billion lottery someday. So then God will just let me win the $1 billion lottery, right? Isn't that how it works? Because if you teach on forgiveness, you know what he's going to let you experience? You're going to get really, really hurt. Not because he doesn't love me, but because he's revealing in me the areas where I'm not living according to his truth. And he wants me to have a better life. So if you had me teach on this subject 2 weeks ago, I'd have taught on it in a totally different light than I do right now. Because 11 days ago, I got a text that hurt me so bad. You ever been hurt so bad that you felt like the world around you got dim? You ever had that much pain? It's like the world's on a dimmer switch. It's like everything goes a little dark. It's just a few words in a text. No big deal, right? Some of you know what it's like to have your soul crushed. You know that pain. 11 days ago, I got just a few words from a person from my past that just crushed me. Just crushed me. And so I needed this message. Because that person is in jail right here. I am demanding payment from this person who has hurt me all my life. All my life. This person has hurt me so many times. And so I threw him in jail. And want me to guess how miserable that person is today? Not at all. Want me to tell you how much pain I'm in? I got all this poison inside of me. But what this message did for me is so clear. I can forgive, that's me. It takes one to forgive. Not based on what they do, they don't even care. Now the question is, do I choose to try to reconcile? That's my choice. I can choose to try or I can choose not to. I don't know what I'm going to choose. I honestly can't tell you that right now. I am going to choose to forgive them because I don't want to live this way. Whether I choose to try and reconcile, I don't know. But I know the trust question. This person has hurt me hundreds of times. They're done. I don't trust them. Trust is earned. If they want to have any kind of relationship in the future, more than just shallow, let's talk about the weather, then they have to earn that trust back. And that will be based on attempting to reconcile and this person owning it. You want me to tell you the likelihood of this person owning it based on my life experience? Yeah. Some of you are not shaking your head. You already know the answer to the question. It's like, forget it. Why? I'm not even going to try. Many of you know that's the reality of your life situation currently. You have someone in jail. You can forgive them, but you know there's no point even trying to reconcile, right? You know that. You know based on countless times trying. You keep banging your head against the wall thinking, this time they're going to understand my pain. Are they going to understand your pain this time? Should you trust them again? It's clear now, right? I can forgive and not be reconciled and not trust them again. So now it's back to that forgiveness question for me. I know I have to forgive. I got to get them out of my head. How do you do that? Number 3 on your notes. You make the decision, and that's what this is. It's simply a decision. It's not a simple decision. Don't mistake that. But it is a decision. And you got to make that decision. I was listening to a pastor talk about this, and the guy said, so many times in life, and you'll have this experience. Now that I put this in front of you, you'll see this. There are people that you meet are just beautiful, wonderful, loving people, and then you get to know them and you hear their story, and you're like, oh my goodness, how are you not drunk in a bar? Right? How are you not sleeping in a gutter somewhere? You lived through all of that, and this is the person you became? And when you get to know them and you hear their stories, you will always hear the same thing. I've heard this. This is true. I've heard this in many, many, many years of doing this. I've heard them, and they always say the same thing. Well, the day came where I just decided that I've had enough. The day came where I decided I'm not going to let them ruin my future. They already took so much from my past, they don't get my future too. They simply make the decision. They make the decision. Which is exactly what the Bible says. Here's the choice you get. You get to choose whether or not you get rid of all bitterness. And look at the word all. Isn't that an important word? You open every jail cell. Every single cell you have in your brain. Every single one. You open all the doors. And you get to choose whether or not you get rid of it or whether you hold on to it. The Bible is very clear. This is a decision you make. You make the decision, today is the day I'm opening the jail cells. Today is the day I'm letting them free. Today is the day I move into my future. I get to start over without being chained to my past. Today is my day. You get to choose these things. So what does it mean to choose it? Well, here's my best shot at this. First out, write out their offenses. If you really want to do this well, especially, if it's no big deal, if they forgot to take the trash out last night and you're just kind of annoyed at them, that's not a big deal. You don't have to write anything out. Please don't write that out. You're going to annoy them. Okay, so it doesn't need to be that big a deal. But the reality is all of you have many of you have serious trauma from your past. You were so hurt for so long. Some of you have lived with secrets all your life. There isn't another human being on earth that knows what happened to you and what was done to you. You suffer so much because of that. Someone said, we're only as sick as our secrets. Because what Satan does in those moments is he takes those secrets and he attaches shame to them and personalizes it. This happened because of you. This is your fault. And you got to get that out of your head. If you're going to forgive someone, especially if the trauma's big, this is what you got to do. This is what I'll be doing this week, some point. Sitting down and just write them all out. Now, what do you do with it after that? I don't know. Some people say burn it. I'm not going to burn it. I don't want to light my house on fire for one thing, but the reality is some of you still have to interact with those people, so your list is going to keep growing. They're not part of your past yet. They're still part of your present. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I know that it's really, really important to look at what you're actually forgiving. Don't just sit here and go, they really hurt me in the past, so I forgive it all. What are you forgiving? How out of balance is that scale? What's on the side? Look at all of it. Second, then you tell God you forgive them. Do not tell them. In most cases, you should never tell them. In most cases, there are very few times you should tell them. The only time you should tell them is if they actually genuinely seem like they're repentant and sorry and they're making moves to you to make things right. Then you can consider having that conversation with them. Most of the time, you go to somebody you've forgiven from your past, you say, I want you to know I forgive you. They will laugh at you. They will turn that into more pain for you. Don't you dare do it. Tell God, say the words, Father, I forgive this person. I pardon their debt. I'm transferring justice into your hands. It's not mine, it's yours. And then third, picture setting them free. Picture setting them free. Using the imagery of what Jesus told in that story, you open all the cells. Some of you, you have people in your cells who aren't even alive. They hurt you a long time ago and they're dead. And you keep their corpse in the cell because you're demanding payment from someone who isn't even alive anymore. What's the point of that? Are they going to come back from the dead and apologize to you and make it right? What are you doing? And the one you won't want to write down. This is a heart issue. Would you please write it down even though you don't want to do it? Would you please write it down? This is a heart issue. Do you understand this? This isn't just a head issue. This is a heart issue. Forgiveness. Jesus said you have to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. Not just here. And the way to get your heart engaged is to do what the Bible says when it says, bless those who persecute you. Don't you dare curse them. Pray that God will bless them, and that's all you're doing. Engage your heart and pray that God will bless them. Now, do you have to tell them that? I want you to know I'm praying that God will bless you. Have you not been listening to anything I've said? Don't talk to them. Don't tell them that. You don't have to say anything like that to them. Just pray, God bless them. Do good things in their life. Change them. Wouldn't it be better if they changed? Can't you just pray for that? That God puts them on a path that brings them to healing? Wouldn't that be a good thing to pray? Just pray that and let God begin to do the work in your heart that he wants to do. One of the reasons this subject is so important is because when it happens, when God shows up and goes, watch this, it's amazing what takes place. This man's name is Jamal McGee. Jamal McGee lived in Benton Harbor, Michigan. One day in 2006, he went to a grocery store, normal day. He went to buy groceries for his girlfriend and his brand new baby boy. Walked out of the grocery store, and this man approached him. Officer Andrew Collins of the Benton Harbor Police Force. He was a dirty cop. He literally said he woke up that day determined to fill his quota on drug arrests. So he picked Jamal McGee at random, walked up, and arrested him for not just drug use, but intent to distribute. He arrested him, falsified all the evidence. Jamal, of course, was sitting there bewildered by it all. He just went to buy some food at a store. The next thing he knows, he's in prison for 10 years for drugs because this lying cop made it all up. Can you imagine the pain? His girlfriend took his son and moved to Indiana. And for years, he never even got to see his son. Can you imagine? Do you know what he said he felt like when he was in that jail cell? He felt like every one of us would. All he thought about was getting out, finding this cop, and hurting him. Right? Like he'd hurt him. Interesting. He's sitting in a prison cell, and in his mind, he's imprisoning the man who's hurt him, right? It's ironic. Eventually, he was caught. And he went to the FBI and he made a deal where he would go back through all of his cases, tell the truth about all of them, in exchange for a lighter sentence. So the cop only went to prison for 18 months. Jamal McGee sat in prison for almost 4 years. But eventually they got to his case. He told him he lied about the whole thing. Jamal McGee is freed. His life is a shambles. His girlfriend's gone. He has no job. Who's going to ever believe that he was innocent? Nobody believes it. He's an ex-con. He has no job. He has to move in with his grandma. Eventually, he's homeless, living in his car. For years, this goes on. In that time, he becomes a Christian. Becomes a follower of Jesus. And there's this church in the area that runs these outreach programs. One of them is a jobs program for ex-cons. And so finally, years and years and years after he gets out of jail, in desperation, he goes to this church group and they get him set up and they put him in this restaurant where ex-cons go and they get jobs and they get them back on their feet. So they establish a work history and get them an income. I mean, it's a wonderful thing for a church to do, isn't it? That's what we should be doing. That's what the church in America should be like. And they're doing it in Benton Harbor. One of the things that they always do is they always assign a mentor to every single con coming into the program because you need somebody to help you think correctly, get back on your feet, right? How important is this? And so they assign to Jamal McGee Andrew Collins, not knowing his past. Because after 18 months of prison, he came out and he became a follower of Jesus. And he got involved in this church. And they had this jobs program. And so he got hired there, and he started working at this restaurant. And eventually, because his life was so different, they made him a mentor. And one day, without knowing anything, they assigned Jamal McGee to be his mentoree. No one knew it. They walked in the room, took one look at each other. Can you imagine what that was like? They both said, in their minds, they looked at the other person and thought, well, this will never work. But Andrew Collins was a Christian. Remember, we're way beyond forgiveness now. He walked up to Jamal McGee, and he said, I have no excuse. I can't defend, I can't explain. What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry. Imagine all that he took from that man. All those years he took away from that man for no reason at all other than his career. Incredibly, God had already been working on Jamal's heart, and Jamal forgave him and stayed in the mentoring program with Andrew Collins as his mentor. And then those other processes kicked in. Because Andrew Collins was sincere about his change, and sincerely following Jesus now, he was a different man. And slowly they began to work side by side together in the restaurant, and they began to build a friendship. And then trust was established. Today, this is them. And they travel all over the country talking about the power of forgiveness, reconciliation, and reestablishing trust. And God has turned something horrific into something beautiful like only our God can do. Only our God can do that. Now, I'd like to tell you that if you forgive everyone in your past, this is your future, right? They're all going to be so sorry that they've hurt you, and you're going to trust them again. It's going to be beautiful, and you're going to be on the news because you're telling your story like these guys. Yeah, it's not going to happen, right? Sometimes God does that. Sometimes God just is like, you watch what I can do. But you don't just trust people, right? Trust is earned. You let them earn your trust back. You don't just jump into a new relationship with that person. You reconcile, and only based upon them willing to own it and take responsibility and apologize, and they've sincerely changed. So let me ask you again, is there someone you need to forgive? And let me ask you, do you even want to? Some of you don't want to forgive them. You want them in that prison cell. You want them to pay you back. And it's never going to happen, and you're hurting yourself. Forgiveness only takes one. Now, if you follow Jesus, man, you have no choice. I'm sorry. Jesus didn't leave you a choice because of what he's done for all of us. If you're just exploring your faith, this is really important that you understand this. We forgive others, regardless of what they choose to do to us, because we have been forgiven everything by this God that we worship here. We have no concept of how out of balance our scale is with God, because we don't know what beautiful really looks like, and we don't know what holy looks like, and we don't know what pure looks like. We live in a pretty messed up world. So we think being good enough is good enough. And our God is a being of pure love, never been unloving. It is offensive and repulsive and damages him. And you and I have spent our lives doing unloving things. We have said unloving things. We have withheld love when we should have showed it. We have been unkind with our words. We've been selfish in our actions and our behavior. We have done so much for us and damaged people all our lives. And every single one of those offenses tipped the scales out of balance between us and God, to the point where the debt is 375 tons of silver. Every one of us owes, and you can never pay it back. And that's why Jesus came. Jesus said, they can't pay that, so I'll pay it. And came into the world 2,000 years ago, and then laid down his life, willingly dying on a cross to pay a debt you and I could never, ever, ever pay. If we had 1,000 lifetimes, we couldn't pay it back. And Jesus paid it all in that moment, and then rose again and said, here you go. Any human being who pleads, like the servant in the story, please have mercy. In that moment, the God of mercy says, you want this, you got it, you're completely forgiven. I pardon your debt. And now because you're pardoned, you pardon others. Let me have you bow your heads. If you're just exploring your faith here with us or watching on YouTube, thanks for coming and giving us a chance. This is what you need to know, is Christianity is about receiving the pardon of God. It is not about anything you do. Nothing. You have nothing, no way to balance those scales. But if you will let God do this for you, he will transform you from the inside out. Just say something like this. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. Please forgive me for what I've done. Please. I know I've created a debt by all the times I've been unloving. And I heard you died on the cross for my debt, so please forgive me. I want that gift today. Now, with your head still bowed, some of you, you know this is your deal. You have people in jail today, and maybe it's time to make the decision. It's time to say, I'm done. I am so done holding this. Would you begin the process today in your own heart? Say, God, I transfer this debt to you. It's yours. I pardon this person. I'm opening that jail cell now. They're free. They don't owe this debt to me anymore. They owe it to you. You do whatever you want with them. In Jesus' name, amen. Now as we finish up, would you all take your little card in your program? Take this out. Maybe you prayed and asked Jesus to forgive you today, and you asked for that gift. Please check the box. Let us know what you did. Or you renewed your commitment to him today. Wonderful. Let us know about that. If you have something you want us to pray about, some of you, this is your deal. Go ahead and write down there. We have a team of people that will pray for you today. Then just drop this in one of the offering boxes back by the doors where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. Hope to see you again next week.